All right, guys. Let's just chat for a second, just to kind of talk about the schedule and everything coming up, and then we'll get going on these activities here. So yeah, so first of all, yeah, we'll have when we get back on Wednesday. So obviously no class Monday because of Easter break. No class this Friday, and then no class Monday with Easter break. And then Wednesday we'll do the gallery walks. Okay, so those are assigned to you by your teams. If you click on that in there, you can see. So make sure you're ready to do those in your team on Wednesday when we get back. And then Friday we'll have the exam. Okay, so that'll be that week. So that's here. And then yeah, and then we'll hop into yeah, that next Monday is when your final paper and concept map is due. So yeah, and then we also have a quiz that's due that day, but the assignment, the final paper is due you know, that night, 11:59 p.m. quiz. That's your last quiz. Will be just the start of class on Monday. Yeah, and then that's our last week of school already. So almost there. It's coming up. How many people does that stress out when you realize? Yeah. So, yeah. Okay. How many people are just like, that's amazing. It's my last week of school. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Some of each for sure. I know sometimes it feels like there's just so many things to do between now and then, right? Is that where some of the stress comes from? Or is it like not sure what you're going to do with your life? Yeah. Some of those too. Yeah, for sure. I get it. All those things for sure. Okay. All right. So yeah, and then yeah. So any questions about any of those things coming up with the gallery walks or other things about the paper that you want to talk about? Any questions on any of those things? All right. Okay. Well, that is that. I guess one thing I'll say for the final exam in this class, I'll have it open up. Probably, yeah, I'll probably have it open up by like Wednesday of that last week of class. So it's just it's a take home. So it's a Word document that you download. You do it on your own with notes and everything, whatever you want to use. So yeah, that'll open up kind of mid that last week. And then but you will need to turn it in by the date of our final exam day, which is Monday for this class. So yeah. Okay. All right. Well, Eve, I just saw this picture, so I figure I'll show you anyways. Eve did break her ankle. We found out, so she does have a growth plate fracture in her fibula there, but so she's got a real cast now. But they gave her like a purple and blue striped cast, so you get to pick whatever you want these days with casts. So yeah, but she's more excited than ever about her cast. So it was a highlight of her day that day was getting the cast. So she's a very positive girl. So that's good. Okay. All right. So today we've got pretty much 3 left, right? But yeah, the last one. Yeah. So which ones do we have? This team? And this, is it just the 2 then? Yeah. Yeah, but Alex isn't here. Where's he at? You're good. You're gonna do it on your own or no?
No, but I have to.
Huh?
No, I have to do it.
Yeah, because you guys haven't. Do you have slides or? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Are you ready to go right now? Okay. Sounds good. Yeah, I got it. So yeah. So the idea with these sets of slides is number 1. So we've got submax VO2 here, and then secondly, this one's also submax. But the first slide is really just supposed to be like which direction. Oh, sorry, you locked up. Sorry, you can unlock it. I thought I had it unlocked. There we go. Yeah, no, you're good. I just forgot to unlock it. Sorry. Thanks. Yeah. 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 So the ideas with these slides are, this first one is like which direction do each of these things change? Okay. So it's just like an arrow up or down or they don't change. But then the second one of each of these is kind of more of the mechanism or the physiology as to why. Okay. So it's a submaximal. This is maximal. Okay. That'll be you guys. And then lastly, we'll talk about the change in the lactate stuff. Okay. So Grace is going to take it away here. Are you going to, yeah. And I got it on my computer here. So let me turn that. This one, right, Chris? Yeah. Okay. All right, guys, let's give Grace your attention here.
All right, so my group was submax VO2. So it changes in the submax VO2 with endurance training. So there's the big equation, which we could go over, but we've gone that over so many times. So first we're going to state is like how or which way the stroke volume changes, which is decreases, which means the preload decreases, afterload increases, and contractility increases. And then a heart rate increases and AOA, arteriovenous oxygen return increases as well. So why is that? So stroke volume decreases at sea level. This is because of the decrease or reduce of plasma volume. Preload decreases because of the increased heart rate, shorter filling time, decrease EPV. Afterload increases. This is because CVR increases due to increased viscosity, drop in PV, and systematic vasoconstriction decreases in ESV. Contractility increases due to SNS stimulation and catacombs decrease after several days to weeks at altitude due to ventilatory accumulation and PNS simulation. Heart rate increases because of decrease in SV, but also slight increase in cardio output. And then the AOV increases, more oxygen is extracted from the blood to meet demands from the increased cardiac output. And I'll leave this up here for you guys to look at and write down.
So, yeah, this is good. I mean, let's work on this. This is unfortunately, this is supposed to be in response to endurance training, not to altitude. So it's slightly different with that.
Okay.
Yeah, so
All right.
yeah, but yeah, some good stuff here for sure. But what I was looking for earlier was yeah, in response to this is kind of more like a review from the endurance training stuff, not so much specifically for altitude stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Grace. Thanks for coming up there. So doing it too. Okay, yeah, so a lot of those things apply to endurance training as well. Did you guys do endurance training for yours?
We may have also done it.
You did that too as well. So
We're like changing.
okay. I'm sorry, I'm sorry that wasn't clear. That's never happened before.
Yeah, I heard about that, it was in the chart, when I was re-looking at the Canvas page, it didn't say it, so I was.
Okay, gotcha, all right. Yeah, sorry for the confusion on that. Well, I'll walk us through this here. Okay, so submaximal VO2, this is really supposed to be kind of, again, review for the exam, looking at all those changes, like we looked at, we talked about endurance training. So stroke volume is obviously going to go up, right? This was the big thing that happens there. And then what effect does that have on heart rate? If we're talking about submaximal, which way would heart rate go if our stroke volume goes up? Well, let's go back to what does submaximal mean? What would be an example of like testing somebody submaximally before training and then testing again somebody submaximally after training? It's different than that. So max will actually change because they'll get more fit, so their max will be higher. But submax, the idea here is it's the same intensity pre and post training, right? It's like the idea of somebody running on the treadmill 6 miles per hour before training. We measure all this stuff, and then we train them for 6 months and put them back on the treadmill for do all the testing again, but still at 6 miles per hour. What would their stroke volume be? What would their heart rate be? That's what I'm trying to get at here with the submaximal idea. Okay, so if stroke volume is up, what would that mean for their heart rate? Decrease, right? Yeah, so that will be lower. Okay. And that has to do with that stroke volume must have to do with these 3 factors here, right? So which way would preload be? Increase, yeah, for sure, okay. Afterload, yeah, potentially down a little bit, but maybe not really change much at all. Potentially down a little bit, the only reason, yeah, we'll talk about why on this side. And then contractility is gonna be up as too, right? Because the heart's gonna be stronger, right? We got thicker walls, we got, those contractility changes we talked about, okay? And then ABO2 difference probably isn't gonna change too much, right? That would really just be like how much oxygen are the cells using during exercise? It's the same intensity of exercise, it's probably not gonna be much different, right? Okay, so then the more important part to understand is this part of why does each one go up? All right, so obviously stroke volume is going up. What do you think the number one factor is why preload would go up? What would lead to giving us more managed return? Couple things, anything that would lead to more managed return after training. What do you guys think? Yeah, it is. What dictates managed return? Blood volume is a big one, right? So we got way more blood volume after training, right? So we have an increase in plasma volume and red blood cell volume. Both of those things are increased. And so that's going to give us more preload, right? We get more venous return. But then submaximally, if we said heart rate was lower, that is going to affect our preload as well, right? Because that increases our filling time. Yeah, so we got more filling time because our heart rate's lower. So that's going to give us more preload as well. And there's one other factor that would allow for more blood inside of that heart after training, based on what we know about how the heart changes structurally with training. Any ideas on what that might be? Chamber gets bigger, right? We get greater internal diameter, right? So increased left ventricular diameter. Okay, so it's really kind of those three different factors there. More blood, we got more room for blood in the heart, and we got more time to fill the heart up between beats. And so all three of those things are going to lead to greater preload, which are going to be the big contributor to this greater stroke volume. Okay, afterload, I said it might possibly go down a little bit with training. That would have to mean that we have lower blood pressure, right? And that could be the case if exercise is a lot easier for us at the same given intensity, then maybe we would have lower sympathetic nervous system activity, right? So we'd be less stressed out. So we'd have less vasoconstriction and we'd have lower blood pressure, okay? So that would be due to decreased SNS, decreased vasoconstriction. Okay, so maybe that's not a big factor, but that's a small decrease. And then contractility goes up too, right? So we have increased, we have hypertrophy of those heart cells. So hypertrophy of cardiac myocytes. We also have increased calcium affinity. Oops, that's not the right way. Troponin. Troponin affinity for calcium. Right, so we get more calcium binding to troponin, and that's going to give us more actin myosin binding. Okay, so really all of those factors are the key factors for stroke volume, and most of those are going to apply to the maximal one too, right? Well, not all of them, but most of them. Okay, and then with heart rate being down, really the only physiology of that is just because stroke volume is up, right? There's really nothing else to explain there except for less sympathetic nervous system activity, so heart rate's lower, right? Decreased heart rate, so we can say that decreased SNS activity, so heart rate's lower. Okay, but those are definitely key factors there. And And then AVO2 difference didn't change much, so we won't really talk about that one, but that one will change a lot maximally for sure. So, yeah. Okay, questions on those? Okay, so here's what we'll do for a sec to give these guys a chance to kind of talk about that a little bit more. And then everybody can as well. I'd like you guys to talk in your teams about the next one. So maximal, you just draw arrows, which way will these things go? And then secondly, talk about the physiology as to why. We kind of just did the stroke volume ones, but not all of those might not necessarily apply. But then the AVO2 difference one we haven't really talked about yet, but that will change maximally. Okay, so all the teams talk about this together for a minute, while the team 2 kind of gets it together for what they're going to say. Okay, go ahead. Sorry about that, Grace. Once I saw the altitude, I wasn't sure if I should stop you right then or not, but you put some work into that, so I want to at least let you present what you.
Like I did all the work because Alex didn't tell me. Like so it's like, here's what I got so far. You tell me what's right or wrong.
Yeah, okay,
So
all right.
So-
Well, yeah.
but my information was right.
Yeah,
Okay,
no, it
that's
looked
what
good.
matters.
It looked pretty good, yeah. Never noticed that. It just says water bottle sticker. Oh, they're everywhere, yeah. I know. True. I know. Yeah, it used to be no big deal to like lose your water bottle, but now they're like 40, 50 bucks. Yeah. It's like, yeah. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, my wife, is a nurse, and she used to bring her like a smoothie in a mason jar every day, like to the hospital. One time she dropped it on the floor and like shattered like everywhere in the hospital floor. Yeah. Like your sweatshirt. Yeah, let's go. How you guys doing? Making some edits? Yeah, yeah, for sure. No John today? No Jamar? Contact me. No John? Yeah.
Early Easter break for the ladies.
What's that?
Early Easter for the ladies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. Happens.
You didn't bring Betsy today?
No. No Betsy today.
How old is she?
Well, like,
She's 5.
when we said
Yeah, we just got her when she's 4 though. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah. She's a
My
good-
roommate and I just got a pit bull this year.
Yeah,
He's 4. He's like 90 pounds.
really?
He
Dang.
thinks he's small.
Yeah, jump
He,
up
like,
on your
jumps on
lap.
the lap, and I was like, oh.
Yeah, totally.
90 pounds. Just
Yeah,
like a
pure
walking
muscle.
cement bag.
Yeah, seriously, those things are so muscly.
I was walking in this morning, he looks like
Yeah,
up
like-
to say hi, and there's this guy walking. He had his headphones on, he got scared, he's like,
Yeah.
hi. He just saw me smiling, he's like,
Good. Yeah. Oh, man.
but you would still. like this.
I wrote. Oh, watch it. So like, do you want us to write down like why left ventricular force increases and like why like
I mean,
vascular-
it's kind of what what we wrote right here.
right,
It's the same
but
thing.
like the why the like the blood vessel size like increases after exercise, just like that it does, and then like then you have like less pressure, and then you can force more blood out, and then you have a decreased afterload.
Yeah, I mean, the first slide is just supposed to be the direction it changes, and then the second
Yes.
slide is supposed to be explaining how it changes.
Yes, we have that,
Yeah.
and then the rest is just explaining how for each one.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
you guys ready?
As much as, yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah,
If you
yeah.
want a really good altitude presentation, we can do that.
You guys are ready?
We'll have to like do a lot.
Yeah.
You can just go to the revision button and then click it. There you go.
Yeah. All right, well, whenever you're ready, then come on up. Slide, so the one I had up changed, right? It was just,
Yes,
yeah.
it should have.
Yeah. Okay. All right, guys, let's go ahead and give this group your attention here. Just put the little mic right here.
Okay, so we're gonna be talking about the changes in maximal VO2 with endurance training. So first, just a general overview. So VO2 max is going to increase, of course, and that comes with increase in stroke volume. And within that, their preload and contractility are going to increase, but afterload is going to decrease. Heart rate, there's not really going to be a noticeable change. And AVO2 will increase. For preload and contractility, since they kind of go together, it increases due to the plasma volume expansion that comes with endurance training, which is going to lead to more blood coming back to the heart and filling the ventricle, which is going to increase EDV. And then for contractility, it kind of goes with the increased filling. If more blood is going into the heart, it's allowing for greater stretch of the heart. And to couple in more active myosin binding, which is going to increase that contractile force of the heart. And also cardiac muscle hypertrophy that comes with endurance training, just allowing the heart to squeeze more forcefully. Ooh. That's an update. Yeah. Oh, see, there it is.
Maybe even go back one if there was something on that last one.
No, that was all.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so afterload. So afterload's gonna decrease overall.
That's because we're just having an increase in stroke volume, like we mentioned earlier. So afterload is also going to decrease because you're going to have a reduced systemic vascular resistance, which is a really fancy way of saying the pressure in the actual like arteries and the aorta leaving the heart is going to be a lot less because it's going to increase in size. So you're pushing blood out and it's going to overall decrease, and you're going to have a little bit of less time. The heart's not going to have to work as much to push blood out and get past that pressure threshold to open up the valve. You're going to have an increased stroke volume and contractility, which pushes more blood out of the heart, and that's going to decrease your afterload. You have less blood just sitting in the heart. And then the left ventricular force increases. This again causes more blood to be ejected from the left ventricle and also decrease afterload. Also, heart rate has no change. This isn't because of like any significant change other than stroke volume increasing. So now we can push more blood out without having to force the heart to work harder. We don't have to increase our heart rate in order to get more blood out. It just pushes more out because we have other factors that are changing.
AVO2 difference, there will be an increase. During exercise, the blood flow to the tissues increase. Hemoglobin dissociates more easily. Increase in capillary density of the trained muscles. And that happens because it's needed to accept the increase in maximal muscle blood flow. As exercise intensity increases, the muscle increases the amount of O2 that is extracted from the blood. Therefore, the AVO2 difference widens during exercise. And that is all.
All right. Good job, guys. For making the shift there.
The right word shift. Just kidding. Sorry, that was bad. It was really bad. Okay. All right. So yeah, just a couple of things. I want to talk about the afterload one for a second because that one is a little bit tricky. But yeah, so stroke volume obviously up, preload up, contractility up, heart rate doesn't change, AVO2 difference goes up. Afterload, I think, is kind of questionable. One way to look at it, in a lot of ways, afterload could potentially be higher at max than it was before training, because you're actually pushing yourself further than you did the first time, right? Like you get to a much higher intensity in your like your body's just being pushed further, so you might actually have a higher blood pressure at the end, but it could also just be about the same too. But that is true what Alex said, that you would have more you'd have more vasodilation happening too at your muscles, because you're using more of you're activating your muscles more fully, and so you got more vasodilation. You have more capillaries there too, so that's going to just lead to more blood in those small vessels that makes your blood pressure lower, but you are also pushing yourself a lot further too. So it's probably one of those things that'll probably kind of balance out and not be a huge difference at maximal. It's like your maximal blood pressure pre and post training probably wouldn't be too much different. If anything, I might say it might go up a little bit, but yeah, so probably not a huge change. But all those things you said are true about how, yeah, you do have more vasodilation and all of that. So yeah, that one is a little bit not necessarily an easy answer for that one. I want to just make sure this. So you, Georgia said plasma volume goes up, but definitely red blood cell volume is a part of that too, right? Because that's part of our blood volume. So if we got more blood volume, it's due to the plasma more so, but also due to the increased red blood cells too. Again, also the diameter of the chamber too, of the left ventricle, right? That diameter is bigger, so that's part of our why we get more preload too, right? But the one that's not on here is the heart rate one, right? And you guys didn't say it, but that's just important to note. A lot of times people will say it's because of increased filling time too. So that's not the case maximally, because their maximal heart rate doesn't change, right? So there's no change in filling time if your maximal heart rate is the same. And they didn't say that. I'm just reiterating that here. Yeah, so then the afterload one. So we'll kind of say a balance of, we have an increase in sympathetic nervous system activity, which would increase vasoconstriction, like systemically, right? So we would have more vasoconstriction all over our body, but then to kind of balance that out, we have increased dilation around our muscles too, right? So we kind of have both of those things going on where we have greater sympathetic nervous system activity, which would lead to more constriction in places we're not using, like our our abdomen, our arms, probably our extremities that we're not really using. But then in the muscles we're using, we're going to have more dilation and more capillaries to put blood in. So those two probably kind of balance each other out a little bit. Does that make sense? Kind of. Okay. All right. And then contractility, the same exact reasons we said for contractility before, right? We got stronger heart cells, we got better calcium handling, and that's going to give us stronger contraction of the heart. And then there are a lot of reasons for AVO2 difference. You guys had a couple of them in there, and obviously this was the last one. I didn't have time to put all of the time into this part because you were just switching that up, but there are quite a few. So everything that we can think of that would lead to greater diffusion or using of oxygen would be related to this. Okay, so we got more capillaries, right? Higher capillary density is going to mean more oxygen diffusion. We got more myoglobin in our muscle that helps us pull oxygen out of the blood, right? We got more mitochondria, so that's going to use up more oxygen. So we create a bigger diffusion gradient. We switch with some of our muscle fibers to type 1 fibers, which is going to use more oxygen, right? We also hypertrophy specifically our type 1 muscle fibers. So we got bigger type 1 muscle fibers. And then we have the rightward shift of the curve as well to a greater extent because we're driving our pH lower, right? We're raising our CO2 higher. We're making our muscles hotter than they had been before because we're using them more, right? So all three of those things shift the curve to the right. So there's quite a few things. There's 1, 2, 3, there's like 6 different factors that could lead to that increased AVO2 difference that we would see. Okay. Questions on this? Okay, then the last one on the last 2 slides here on lactate. And did you guys want to screen share or did you send it to me or screen share? Okay. Either way, doesn't matter. Screen share, okay. Kick this off. Okay, should be ready.
Okay. So we're just gonna start with the basics here and then I'll be explaining more in the following slides. But with lactate and endurance training, the overall effects, you'll have a higher lactate threshold, which you can see on this graph. The red line is after training and then the athlete has a higher threshold than the blue line. And overall lactate production is decreased. That coincides with the increased buffering capacity that we'll get to in a minute. And then changes in appearance specifically. So your lactate is decreased maximally due to decreased overall production. And then your threshold will appear later. So that's what the next one is talking about. And then you can see where the blue line is of someone who's untrained and then the lactate threshold of someone who has had training.
Okay, and then a few of the changes that I found out lead to this would be the substrate utilization. So saving carbs is more energy that comes, or more energy comes from fats, and then increasing fat storage, increasing mitochondrial capacity. The sympathetic nervous system activation decreases, which leads to decreased glycogen usage, which leads to less lactate, and this is all because of the increased oxidative capacity.
Okay, so for lactate disappearance, so in the graph, you can actually see that in sub-maximal exercise, it looks like post-training, there's a decrease in lactate, in the rate of disappearance of lactate, but it's really just because your body's not producing as much, and so that just leads to less lactate disappearance. And you can see in maximal exercise that the rate of disappearance does increase from pre-training.
And the increase in rate of disappearance of lactate in maximal exercise is due to an increase in lactate production, increase in lactate shuttles, and increase in bicarbonate ions, and increased circulation.
Didn't keep up with you guys. Okay. Okay, so that, so yeah, I was just trying to keep up with what they were saying there. I didn't quite write it all down. But yeah, definitely on the appearance side of things, like I said, increase maximally, decrease submaximally. The reasons for the submaximal ones. I like how, Braden, you said decrease SNS activity, decrease lactate usage. Because that's a big part of this, right? That we talked about before how the SNS activity is what kind of dictates our glycolytic system usage or anaerobic system usage. So if a given level of exercise is less stressful for us, then we'll use the oxidative system to do it instead of the glycolytic system. And so all these changes are related to greater oxidative system capacity. And then the physiological changes are actually all of these same 6 changes right there for AVO2 difference. It's all the same ones, right? The reason we can use the oxidative system more is because we got more capillaries to feed oxygen to the cells. We got more myoglobin to transport oxygen in the cells. We got more mitochondria to use the oxygen, right? And then we just have more powerful oxidative fibers by having some type 1 fiber hypertrophy and more type 1 fibers with switching. And we drop off more oxygen because of the right shift, right? So all those things are the exact same things that lead to the greater ability to use the oxidative system. So definitely want to connect those things there. The same things that do AVO2 difference maximally increase also allow us to use the oxidative system more and and allow the submaximal lactate to be lower. Okay, and then the maximal one y is greater, and I think they said all these things as well, is, and maybe they didn't say this one, we have an increased glycolytic enzymes too. So we talked about that a little bit at the very end of those notes, but we actually get like more PFK, right? That one that is the rate limiting enzyme of the glycolytic system. We get more of that, right? We also get some more glycogen storage in our muscle too, right? That would be related to this. Okay, so we just get a more powerful glycolytic system too, right? So when we're at our max, we push ourselves even harder, and we can make more lactate because we have a more powerful glycolytic system. That's the maximal part of that, right? Okay, and then again, it's, and I think Peyton said this at the beginning, but it's good to remember the definition of lactate threshold is when production of lactate exceeds clearance, right? So we're just looking at the production side here with the appearance, but then we'll talk about the clearance one, and they talk about the clearance one next. So questions on those ones? So again, we're connecting the submaximal changes to all of these things, and then the maximal changes to these things, and they're totally different. What causes both of those? And again, just remember that all these things that led to the greater oxidative system capacity were those same 6 factors on the previous slide with the AVO2 difference ones. Okay, questions on this? Anybody still writing stuff down? I'll give you another second. A couple of them. Okay, and then with the rate of disappearance ones, right? So yeah, perfect submax goes down. It's just because we're not making as much. There's no really physiology to explain there. Okay, but maximal goes up, right? And you guys listed these changes, but that's what I was trying to write down when you're looking at me. So increased circulation would be one. All right, we have increased lactate shuttles. So we make the lactate, but we can shuttle it to another cell, so it never even shows up in the blood. We get better at doing that, right? We actually do get increased Cori cycle enzymes. And that's connected to the circulation one too, right? We have to circulate it through the blood, get it to the liver, and then once it gets to the liver, we can, remember the Cori cycle is how we turn lactate back into glucose, right? So we can do that more effectively. And then we also, yeah, they mentioned too, increased bicarbonate buffering system, which is related to this, for sure, that's what helps us steal the extra hydrogen ions from the lactate, right? Yeah. So you're better at clearing, so this is the clearance side, you're better at clearing lactate and better at producing it as well. Okay, one of the bottom line things I want to make sure everybody understands here is these lactate threshold changes and this AVO2 change that we see here. None of that really has a big effect on our VO2 max. Right? Our VO2 max change that we see is really driven by the stroke volume side of things, because that's the bigger limiter, right? And we talked a lot about how VO2 max might increase for maybe the first 6 months of an endurance training program, and then it might stop, right? But that person could still get faster, right? But it's not because their VO2 max gets higher. It's because they can use a greater percentage of their VO2 max. So we would link those changes to this right here, to the AVO2 difference change, which is directly related to these things too, right? So if we can, even if our VO2 max doesn't change, we can increase that lactate threshold, which allows us to use a greater percentage of our VO2 max. And the bottom line there is that we have a higher maximal sustainable VO2 if our lactate is higher, even if our VO2 didn't change, VO2 max didn't change. So just want to connect those dots, but okay. Questions on any of those things? All right, guys, have a wonderful break. See you on Wednesday, week from today. Have a great Easter, and come ready for the gallery walks.
Hard enough.